Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and something happened. I filmed my first impressions video of this Microtech LUDT while I was on a hike. It's actually a couple of days ago now. I'm coming up on when I should be doing the full review of this knife, but I went to post it this morning and I had accidentally deleted it when I was making some room on my phone. That should stop being so much of a problem because I'm about to have a new camera show up, which I can't wait to show you guys when that does. But in the meantime, I lost the footage of my first impressions of this knife. So before I go film my full review, probably tomorrow or the next day, yeah, it'll probably be in 2 days, I wanted to kind of rewrap what my first impressions were on the Microtech LUDT. It was funny when I was filming the first impressions video on this. Now I know, so I won't have to go down this rabbit hole, but I didn't know what L stood for on LUDT, because on here, it's funny, on the blade, it probably won't show up because the stone washing on here. Maybe you'll be able to see that. But it says L, Underwater Demolition Team, which I think is funny. Like, why didn't they say what the L stands for? Like, that just gets a letter and everything else gets broken down. Anyways, I think it stands for Large Underwater Demolition Team. I might even be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what LUDT stands for. Anyway, this is a knife that was loaned to me by my buddy YD Knives. Just like any of the videos of knives that I've borrowed from him or anybody else, I'll be linking to his Instagram down below in the description. Super nice guy with a really cool knife collection, posts some great photos, so check him out if you're not following him already. But this is one of the knives that he loaned to me, and I've been wanting to try out an LUDT for a long time. I haven't. Let's be real fair here. This design, to me, is one that aesthetically is okay. There's something about the way that the blade, we've got a ramp here, which is fine. The spine sits above the back of the handle, but the way that it comes up off of this lowest part of the handle and the profile of the edge kind of sits above even this flat aesthetically, it just always looks like the blade should be shifted down to me. Like it sits a little high, like it's on a weird, like the way it sits in relation to the pivot even. I don't know, it's a different profile. And so I've never hated it, but I've always thought there was just something like the littlest bit funky to it. It kind of reminds me of, this is going to be a weird niche way of describing this, but Lexus came out with a car a couple years ago now. It's their coupe. I think they call it the LC 500. And I don't know how many of you guys are car guys who watch this, or car people, if there's any females watching this, but the way that they designed the A-pillar on that car and the way that it met up with the hood, the way that my brain processes it, I don't know how to handle it because it just looks so incorrect to me. What they did is, usually you have the hood of the car, which slopes this way, right? And then you have the A-pillar, which is where the hood meets kind of the windshield. And there's that first support pillar that goes up. So you've got the hood coming this way, and then you've got the support pillar. And what happens is this hood line is usually met by the window line that follows behind it, right? So that it looks like if you cut the A-pillar off right at its base and the B-pillar and the C-pillar, that from the hood, the whole car would still flow. But what they did on the Lexus LC, I think I've got that right, is where it met the A-pillar, the hood that is, where it met the A-pillar, they put it higher, noticeably higher than the window line that sat behind the A-pillar. So it gave it this weird, like it almost reminds me of like a toucan, like it has a weird snout beak on it because the hood sits higher than the window line and it's right where it meets the A-pillar. So it's got this weird like shift where the car looks like it should be like this and they just like scrunched it a little bit, and it drives me nuts to look at it. And I feel like that's kind of what's happening here, is my brain just doesn't quite know how to sort out that the blade should, even if it's still this high here, I feel like the edge should be all the way down here where it's like in relation to the handle, there's not this weird uptick curve here. I don't know. Again, I don't think it's the ugliest thing in the world, but I don't like that from a design standpoint. It messes with my head. Anyway, this is an automatic Microtech. So I remember when I was filming the first impressions of this, I accidentally went down quite the rabbit hole talking about automatic knives in California. The funny thing is I was carrying it out on a hike to do my first impressions that day, and there's an inherent illegality in California to carrying automatic knives, which I'm not going to promote carrying things that are illegal. Of course, I would never do that. That's not something that I'm recommending that you do. But every time that I've owned autos, may have accidentally slipped out of the house every now and then, forgetting to take it out of my pocket. They're legal to own, but they're not legal to carry here. So for that reason, I own less of them inherently, because they're just less useful to me because I have to worry about carrying them. What's frustrating to me about that is the inherent stupidity that accompanies the illegality of this knife. Because for some reason, this knife, because I can press that button, look at this. Oh, it's terrifying. I can press that button, and all of a sudden, because it does that, it is more dangerous than this knife. This knife will kill people, while this knife would never kill another human being. It doesn't make any sense. It's one of those laws that, along with many in California, I think are absolutely ridiculous. So I am in no position to change the law. I just have to deal with it however I may. But that comes into play for me whenever I'm purchasing automatics. And I've owned several. I've owned some Microtech automatics, some ProTech automatics. I like automatics. I find them fun. But I usually also, after like a couple of weeks with one, even like a really fun OTF, if not a couple weeks, then a couple of months, the fun factor of it kind of wears off after a little while. And it's just, they're cool, and they're like cool to show to people, but I don't find automatics ever to be any more functional. In fact, I'll say that a push button out the side auto like this, it's cool. It's a satisfying thwack when it opens, great. But I also just got the ProTech Malibu, which you'll notice is also button lock, but this one's a manual flipper with a proper detent. And when I want to close the Malibu, I just press the button. Boom! Closes all the way. Free drops, like a guillotine. It's fantastic. When you're closing an auto, that's me pressing the button in. There's so much spring tension that to close it one-handed even, I have to like just get it just past and release the button so it stays, and then it's kind of sketchy. I have to use my thumb and press that spring all the way, and then it clicks back into place. And it's doable, it's fine, but I find a lot of the time, if I'm like out and I pull out an automatic knife to use it, and it's not a double action OTF, then to close it, I'm pressing the button, and then I'm pressing the spine of the blade like against my leg or something next to me, and I'm closing it that way, because it's really easiest to either do it two-handed or to press it against some other object than to try to do it one-handed. It's doable, but for that reason, out the side autos aren't always my favorite. Even though there's some fun factor to them, I don't think it's actually any more fun than a well-done button lock like this, which also has a fun closing action. Because opening action is only half the fun. This knife sucks to close. That's the reality. It's not fun to close an automatic. On a double action, OTF automatic, yeah, it's fun. I get it. That's cool. And I enjoy it, just like I'm sure everybody else who thinks knives are cool enjoys it, but it does usually kind of wear off after a while. What I will say about this one, compared to like Microtech OTFs that I've owned, is the grind on this knife is stellar. It is really thin behind the edge. Like one of the thinnest knives behind the edge currently in my possession. This one happens to be semi-serrated, so it's difficult to feel thinness behind the edge over here, but even up here, it's very thin. And I've put it through just like some packaging. I cut a little bit of rope with it just to feel how it did, and it did fantastic. So it's a really, really good blade for cutting. And as much as I kind of ragged on the looks when I started out, the ergos on this knife, for me, they've really surpassed my expectations. I expected it to be pretty good because I thought almost for sure my fingers would fit in this primary groove here. If you have much fatter fingers than me or bigger hands than me, you probably won't like the profile of this handle, because for me, they fit like perfectly in that notch. If your hands were bigger, then it would be kind of an uncomfortable, you'd be hanging off like right on the hump. But for me, ooh, it snugs in there really well. And the jimping they've put there is actually really well done. Don't tell anyone I said that. I usually don't like jimping, but it's a nice 2 little spots with non-aggressive jimping that just makes me feel like I'm indexed and locked in. I like it. But another thing that I'd heard and kind of forgotten about was that the handle of this knife is actually tapered. It's thickest up here, just above the pivot, and it tapers down all the way down to the butt end of the knife. So you get this really nice like sensation, that thickness. I don't know, it feels like at the thinnest part of my hand down here, where it's my little finger holding onto it, it's less meat of the knife, and up front where my hand is thickest and there's the most grip happening on the knife, I've got the thickest portion to hang on to. And it really works well. I don't even know if I'm describing it properly, but it feels really nice in hand. In addition to that, the clip that they use is really functional in and out of pocket. It's not deep carry. I would prefer if it was deep carry, but it works great. It's very easy to get in and out of pocket, and it's got great retention. And in hand, it's not bothersome at all. At least for me, I honestly can barely feel that that clip is there, and it's not like poking me, prodding me, anything like that. It's just nice and neutral and smooth. So let's talk another good thing. We talked about how thin the blade is behind the edge. It's a nice, reasonable kind of EDC thickness. This knife isn't like stupid thin stock. It's very reasonable. I haven't put calipers on it. I don't know exactly how thick it is, but what I love that I can tell you for sure is that they took the time to round this spine. And I've probably mentioned this in a couple of videos before if I've ever been handling a knife with a rounded spine, but I adore rounded spines on knives. If I'm using like a bushcrafting knife that I have to strike a fire steel with, of course I want a nice abrupt like 90-degree angle. But on an EDC like pocket knife, I don't understand why more people don't round spines. To me, it's just so much more comfortable. It makes the knife feel more finished, and like they took more time in the production and the creation of this knife. And I don't know. I imagine it's not, from an engineering standpoint, that much more difficult to build this knife. How much cost does it add to round the spine? Whatever it is, I think it's worth it, because I genuinely appreciate having a nice rounded spine. It's so much more comfortable, and paired with this really non-aggressive jimping that's already just like kind of shallow and wide set, and then to have it rounded as well, it's really comfortable for me. I can't say that I prefer having this jimping on here, but it doesn't bother me. I could take the jimping or leave it, which for me is usually kind of about as good as it gets on talking about jimping. The only other spots where there's jimping, other than those 2 little spots here and here, are back here, which actually in a reverse grip feels really nice to have that little bit of traction right there, and I don't feel it in any other grip. And then just right here, kind of leading up toward the spine. So I guess if you were, I don't know, when I'm in a saber grip, my thumb lands here, but I could press back to here and kind of push that tip forward a little more by using that spot. I don't know. I guess I do feel it a little bit too on this part of my thumb when I am on the ramp. So again, jimping that I could take or leave. Doesn't bother me, but I don't find that it's like adding utility for the way I would use this knife. But yeah, so the l.u.d.t is really cool. It's a Microtech, so it's inherently going to be cool and tactical, and this one being just like a stone-washed blade with black is a more muted one. You can get these obviously in plain edge. I wouldn't personally pick serrated. I know some people dig it, but you can get them in all plain edge. You can get them in different blade finishes, a ton of different colors on the handles. You can get bronzed hardware, I think. Some of them even have like a bronzed blade finish. There's all kinds of stuff. So many options from Microtech. And I think this is actually one of their less expensive models. I want to say it's like 230, 240 bucks for the typical one. For Microtech, that's pretty competitive. And yeah, it just works really well. I think if you're looking at an automatic knife and you're into Microtech, there's something different about an OTF. Like inherently OTFs to me are way more exciting to operate, to pull out and show to people. It's just like it's a more exciting knife platform than an out the side auto. But this as a knife for doing knife type tasks, i.e. cutting, is going to perform so much better than any of the OTFs I've handled from Microtech. Just the way that it's ground, it inherently has so much advantage. The ergonomics of it, of still feeling like a proper knife in the hand, the way it fills out and fits your hand and you get locked in on it. It's just, OTFs are much less practical. And so I guess a lot of the argument for OTFs would probably be like more of a self-defense application. Even then, I don't think an OTF would be what I would pick for self-defense, just the nature of their construction. And I don't know, to each their own if people love OTFs for that reason. But to me, OTFs are kind of gimmicky. They're like something that people own because they think they're cool, and they might justify it with some reasons around it because it's still a knife, it'll still cut. But the only reasons I've ever bought an OTF are because I think they're cool. It's not because I think it's going to be any kind of competition for any of the like proper folding pocket knives that I have. That said, this, it's still cool, still a Microtech, still has a really cool snappy action, still an automatic, but this is like the automatic for people who really want to use their knives, I think, especially from Microtech. I still really want to try a SOCOM Elite, but if I do, it's going to be a manual one. I think I would just prefer the manual, but they do make that one in auto as well, so that may be another compelling option from Microtech for being a real like user EDC knife that's very functional but still has the cool factor, and that one's probably even more kind of tactical than this one. But as like an all-arounder EDC knife, the SOCOM is like 4 inches of blade, and it's much bigger than this, and it's tip down only. This being tip up, right hand, yeah, you can't even go left hand, tip up, right hand. I think it's about a 3.5 inch blade, not 100% certain, but it seems like 3.5 inches to me. This is like, this to me feels like Microtech's EDC offering for people who really want to use their knives beyond having a cool OTF for the sake of having a cool OTF. This seems like the one to get if you really want to use it. And of all the Microtechs that I've held, it really, that comes through in holding it and using it. Yeah, I think, I don't know, it's hard. If the blade just came right down to here, I'd probably be like really spitting with this knife. But when I look at it, it's just something about it, the way that this spot and this spot sit so low. Maybe that's even it, because this line is even with the blade, but it's like the little guard and the swell at the back come down too low. Kind of looks like those Spyderco kitchen knives that they make now that are supposed to be able to like set down, like the counter puppies, I think they call them, where this is the same way. Like you could set it down on a surface, and because these spots stick down, it's like it's got legs. I don't know. It just, it's that little bit off to me, and it just tickles me in a way that I don't quite like. But the knife functionally is fantastic. The grind is one of the better I've felt, not just from Microtech, but as like an EDC knife. The grind on this is phenomenal. It's really great fit and finish. Yeah, there's not much to like rip this knife apart for. Everything about it is done really well. And would I love to see them make a manual version of this with a blade profile that fixed that aesthetic thing that bothers me and probably only me? Yeah, if this knife came in a manual and it was like this Malibu, and I could close it like this and wouldn't have to worry about getting caught carrying it or anything like that, then there would be a real strong case for me owning one and carrying it frequently, because everything about this knife feels like it wants to work and work hard, and the little bit of work I have done with it, it excels at it. So I guess that'll be my first impressions. I'm going to be packing this into pocket a couple more days before I do my full review. I'm going to do a little bit more extensive cutting with it and just kind of stewing it over in my mind to come to a final conclusion on it. But this will be my, it's hard to call them first impressions now because I deleted that footage like I said, but my middle impressions of the Microtech l.u.d.t, which is the perfect knife if you like to go underwater and demolish things. or if you just like to carry an auto and cut stuff like a normal human being. But there you have it. That is the l.u.d.t, and there's more to come on it real soon.